Hello and welcome to Careers Talks Live with Max from the Young Project. Today we are delighted to have Arran Bee with us here. I think we should start off very basic, kind of what is your job title and what does your job entail?
Well, my full-time job is that I work at University of Derby, where I'm a journalism lecturer. I've been doing that for just over 2 years now, and I'm really enjoying it, to be honest. I mainly teach radio journalism, audio journalism. So audio journalism involves a bit of radio, but also podcasting, which is obviously a kind of big growth area as well, and digital audio. I teach mobile journalism, which has been a real pleasure to me to kind of, hone my skills in that area, because again, it's kind of real emerging area, and I do a little bit of kind of other types of journalism as well, a little bit in regulation as well. But yeah, that's what I've done for the last couple of years. But I kind of came to that because it's probably a little bit more interesting. Spent the last 15 years working full time in radio. So in that time, I was a newsreader, a reporter, I was a producer, and I was a radio manager for the last few years as well. So last kind of 7 or so years, I worked for the BBC, and also before that, working for a number of different commercial radio stations in the Midlands. Gem 106 was one of them in Nottingham, but a few others outside of Nottingham as well.
Awesome. So, I think that this kind of industry is quite a difficult one to get into because you need that initial break, don't you? And you need to, I think, having good contacts is potentially one of the key things to be able to initially get into that. So did you find that difficult to kind of make that move, or how did that kind of work?
Well, I guess everybody's kind of lucky to some extent, aren't they? And I was definitely lucky a number of times along the way. I think, the route I kind of came into radio through was doing a broadcast journalism degree at Nottingham Trent University. And then as part of that, they encourage you to do a number of work experience placements. My first work experience placement I did was at the station that's now called Gem 106. It was called Century 106 at the time. Mm-hmm. And that absolutely massively kind of changed things for me. I suppose before doing that, I'd gone into doing this journalism degree because I thought it'd be interesting and I thought I'd like it. And I did like radio, I was a real radio anorak, and I was a real listener of radio, sport radio, listening to radio at night when I should have been in bed, talk radio I really liked as well. So I was into radio, and then I did the broadcast journalism degree because it was interesting. But once I did the work experience, I just thought this is fantastic. So I did 3 weeks work experience at Century. I did a task that ended up with something being on air every day.
Wow.
So what they kind of do with work experience people is, they send you out on a Vox. So if you don't know what a Vox is where you take a piece of recording equipment into the street, you stop people in the street and you ask them a question and you record their answer. And then when you get back to the studio, you edit it together into a little package. And, that is massively scary to do, especially, I was 18 at the time. And just stopping people in the street is weird, right? You've probably been stopped in the street for one reason or another, whether it's somebody's trying to sign you up for a charity or something like that, right? It's kind of slightly annoying when somebody stops you in the street. So to be the person doing the stopping was kind of a bit weird and a bit scary. But actually, looking back on it, it was a massive test. And that still happens in work experience now. And ultimately, I suppose I kind of had two choices there, because the way it worked was I didn't even get my coat off on my first day. They didn't even show me around the building. It was literally here's a microphone, go and ask about. I can't even remember I wish I could remember what it was about, but I can't remember what the question was. Go out and get a Vox about this. And it's strange how you have those kind of key points where you're actually, I could have just tried a little bit and not got anybody and gone back and just said I couldn't get anybody, and that probably would have said to them, it's not really tried very hard. Or actually you're just right, this is a bit weird, but I'm going to give this a go. And actually I got loads more responses than I needed. So when we came to edit it together, I remember the news editor didn't even listen to half of them because he's like, right, you've got everything you need there. And I was like, there's loads more. Spoke to loads more people. So, you know, I suppose that little story, I suppose what I'm trying to illustrate is like, there are kind of a number of things along the way where things could have gone either way. And I've always kind of tried to take the approach of just like giving it a go. So I did work experience, and yeah, I did those Voxers every single day. Some people hate Voxing. I think most people hate it to begin with because it's a bit weird. But like I got used to it quite quickly, and I got over it quite quickly. And you know, once I showed that I could do that, they gave me some other stuff to do, and that one thing leads to another. So yeah, I did the degree, got in on work experience, and then kind of built it up from there, basically.
Yeah, but I mean, you said that you got lucky. I mean, yeah, you may have done with the initial opportunity, but then you made your own thing of it. You worked hard enough to make something of it because
tried to,
you know,
yeah,
like because it's, you know, as much as you have the opportunity, as you said, you could have gone either way, and because you just put yourself out there and you did it, you managed to take that next step of progress, which has helped you hugely.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can try really hard and it doesn't work out for you, you know. But all you can do is give something a go. But yeah, I definitely remember thinking, even at that point when I was 18, I've kind of got a choice to make here. And this is like as soon as I'd stepped through the door on work experience. So you know, obviously, I feel I did the right thing. And you know, I've seen people kind of come in on work experience. A lot of people come in on work experience over the years, and you know, sadly, you kind of form a judgment on people quite quickly if you feel that they're just kind of sitting quietly, not putting themselves forward for anything, not really wanting to take on any work. And like, actually, now I'm a bit older, I realize like that is through like fear, basically. But, you know, I think those kind of, I look back on that work experience I did and think that went really well. And it kind of set me off on my whole career, basically.
Amazing. So that kind of relates to one of the questions we've got in the chat, which says, is volunteering in this industry helpful for getting a job?
Yes, very much so. So this is a big thing right now. So, you know, my first time in professional radio was when I was 18. And when I did my work experience, I had to write to the station and, you know, say I was a big fan of the station, and I wrote a few things that I liked about the station. So, and then they gave me some dates. So that was great. And you can still do that. And I think if you want to write to a station to ask for work experience, it's worth showing a bit of interest in the output and what you think about it. You don't have to do a lot really there, but you just have to show a bit of interest. So yeah, doing that is still a way to do it. It's quite an old school way of doing it, but you can still do it. The thing you've got now is that I probably didn't have so much of at that time is community radio's really grown in that time. So there are a number of community radio stations in and around Nottingham. There are a number in the slightly wider area as well. So Derby, Derbyshire as well. You know, I could probably think of at least 5 off the top of my head. And they've sprung up in the last kind of 10 to 20 years. And part of their remit is, you know, bringing new people into the industry. So, you know, if I was starting out again now, I think I'd be approaching community radio as well, because that's just a way of learning some radio skills. And usually community radio is run by people who've worked in the industry, who've got some experience to kind of pass on. So that can be a really useful way into it. And the other thing is, like with the rise of podcasts and with the rise of kind of digital audio, you know, you can create your own content without anybody even kind of giving you the chance to do it. You can just do it for yourself. And that's a big thing for people coming into the industry now. Like, yeah, I was kind of lucky that I wrote a letter to get work experience. I wrote some letters and didn't get any work experience as well. But I wrote a letter, got some work experience, and that kind of set me on the track. Now, you know, you can write those letters and not get a result, and that's not reflection on you. It's just, you know, it's just bad luck, I suppose. But the thing is, if you started your own podcast, you learn how to edit, you kind of learn how to structure something, you might learn how to do an interview. And these are all like essential things in radio journalism. And you can do that without anybody giving you permission to do it. And I would definitely say to anybody thinking they would like to get into radio or audio production or even, you know, professional podcasting now, just do it, because you'll learn something. It doesn't matter if your content is rubbish at the start. I think some people don't do it because they're scared about the quality of what their podcast might be like. Just do it because you'll learn something from it. So I'd say, yeah, work experience definitely. Community radio is more of an option now, I think, than it used to be. And just, start a podcast, start an interview based podcast or a talk, discussion based podcast, and you'll learn plenty from doing that. So any of those things I think can help you. And the good thing about the podcast is it then gives you something that you can send to potential employers when you get it to the standard. You think, I'm quite happy with that. You can then send it to somebody, and it can almost be like a bit of a kind of like a demo tape for you, I suppose.
Evidence, isn't it?
Yeah, those things are definitely a useful way in.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that I was going to say as well. So just while kind of before going on to the next bit, for the guys in the chat, just if you want to answer, are any of you guys interested in radio media as a career? Just kind of answer that, and then while you're doing that, we'll just kind of keep talking and stuff. But I'm conscious I don't just want to talk at people for half an hour. But yeah, so I think that's a key point that you raised there with any job, like even beyond radio and beyond everything. Like the more experience that you have, the better, because it evidences the fact that you're able to do a particular job. So with radio, as you said, it's a very competitive and difficult industry to get into without the experience. But you can build up your experience from the comfort of your own home, can't you?
Yeah. So, I mean, experience is one thing, and you can, and that's definitely something that's easier to do now than it used to be. Now, it's probably actually harder to get work experience now than it used to be. Take Nottingham as an example. Obviously, Gem is still based in the city. But what used to be kind of Trent had quite a large newsroom has kind of become part of the big kind of Capital FM network, and it does mean there probably are fewer opportunities there in the city, at least because of that. Probably across the network there are probably still lots of work experience opportunities, but you might have to go to other places to get them. So yeah, work experience is probably slightly harder than it used to be. Community radio is really growing, but yeah, the stuff you can do for yourself, I can't stress it enough. And you literally do a bit of a Google, you can find out like the basics of starting a podcast in about 5 minutes. And what you don't need expensive equipment. You can literally do it on your smartphone to start with. You don't need to spend a penny, and it can start from there. Now, yeah, building up and just to pick up on what you said there, building up your experience is one thing, and you do need to do that. You do need to have a certain amount of stuff to show what you can do. But actually, I think, especially for new people coming into the industry, and I think we are actually really looking for potential as well. And that kind of comes from like the kind of giving it a go thing that I mentioned earlier, in that radio editors are not expecting work experience people to walk through the door that are the end product, but they're looking for someone who they think in a year or two's time they could really do really well. And that can just that we'll probably get onto it later but that can just be about how you deal with people, giving it a go, being reliable, being hardworking, asking questions, making notes, doing good networking, all that kind of stuff. We can go into more detail in that if you want. So yeah, experience is one thing, you do need it, but how you present yourself and how you kind of grasp opportunities is important as well.
Completely agree with you there. So we've got one person in the chat saying they're more interested in written journalism. They'd be too embarrassed to do radio. I mean, to be fair, like it's not for everyone, but at the same time, I think you don't know unless you try with these things. And it might, you might think like, oh, I'm rubbish at that. Like, but then when you try it, you get better. It's the same with like public speaking. You think that you're bad at it or you're unsure until you actually do it, and once you have a bit of experience, you kind of you build it up.
Confidence is absolutely massive, and like however people like appear. I'll come on to the written journalism thing in a minute because I've got some stuff to say about that hopefully might be helpful. But like however confident you think other people look, like I guarantee, like especially in kind of broadcasting, I'm sure it's the same in lots of other industries as well. Like the confidence is a veneer, like it's a projection in a lot of the time, and like very few people are like super self-confident in every single thing they do and don't feel failure in any way, shape or form, and don't care about criticism at all. Like most people, like most humans, fear fear failing and are kind of scared of putting themselves out there and like are unsure whether they can do something. And I think actually like training yourself a little bit to just kind of overcome those feelings is kind of part of it. On the kind of written journalism side, I'd say, you know, if you're looking to get into written journalism, the same things I've said kind of still apply. So yeah, you know, podcasting is basically an audio form of blogging. So if you want to get into written journalism, yeah, you can try and get work experience with your local paper. Yeah, there are kind of loads of like free/online publications that are out there that you could probably send your work to, and you know they might publish it if they like it. So there are kind of loads of those opportunities. But again, kind of similar on to the podcasting point, you know you can start a blog, and you know the way to become a better writer is to write and write and write and write and kind of find what you're interested in. And I suppose at least coming into the industry now, you'll kind of get used to like the audience being very close to you and getting a lot of audience feedback. Whereas, you know, people who are kind of my age and older probably came into the industry where you didn't have the comments section at the bottom of the page all the time. So, you know, you will come into it that way. So, you know, I'd say if you're interested in written journalism, the same thing applies. You don't have to wait for permission from someone. You know, start your own blog, and once you get it to the standard where you think I think this is quite good, that gives you something you can send to someone, and that might make the difference between getting work experience and not getting work experience. You know, if you can say, look at all this stuff I've written, I guarantee it's going to give you a massive advantage over someone just writing a letter saying, can I do 2 weeks in your newsroom, please? So it's kind of same principle applies, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because like, if you imagine there's so much competition for work experience and stuff nowadays that it's a challenge to, like, even with getting a job, everyone says how competitive it is, but even in work experience as well, like you kind of have to stand out from the crowd, and there'll be like 15, 20, maybe even more people applying for the same thing. And there's only a certain amount of capacity that the radio has. But like, yeah, if you have evidence of something which you've done, which can differentiate yourself and show that you worked hard and you want to learn something based on that, it's going to make you stand out a lot more. And then we've got another question which says, in your profession, do you have to be good at taking criticism, constructive or not?
Yes. What can I say? So I'll try and be constructive in my answer there. I think in all jobs, I think you have to learn to take a degree of constructive criticism. I think it actually, it's part of learning. And I think the thing is I'll use my industry, radio, as an example. I can think of times where it can feel quite personal. It hasn't been personal in the sense of like somebody's told me you don't know what you're doing. Like it is criticism of the work, not of me as a person. But I think, if I've spent a lot of time on an interview or a lot of time on a package, and somebody kind of, gives you a number of kind of points of feedback on it. I think in the early days, that kind of thing did demoralize me a little bit. But that was only really in the early days. I think that's probably before I really understood, well, what am I actually trying to create here? So for example, like all radio stations have a target audience, right? They have a very specific idea of who that station's talking to. And I suppose when I was very new, I would go into a radio station that had not worked before and think, well, I know how to make a package, for example, and this package is good. And the thing is, it can be both good, but not right for that target audience, not right for that radio station. And that radio station might have a particular way of doing things. And I think, you do have to learn to take criticism, but, the question says constructive or not, and I'd hope you'd never take personal criticism. I really, I don't think I've ever had personal criticism. I don't think anybody has ever said to me, "You're no good" or "You don't know what you're doing." It's always been criticism about the work. I think it probably took me a little while to learn that it's criticism about the work and not me. But actually, I think once I learned that, I can really, you know, I've given a lot of criticism as well, and I think part of working in the industry is you have, you know, you've got to accept that you're going to get some, but I can definitely take it. You know, and you know, sometimes, God, can I think of times when I've really disagreed? I think it's quite rare you'll fully disagree with the criticism you get. I think you'll recognise some kind of you know, some truth in what that person's saying to you. You know, I feel like I can think of times where I thought maybe the criticism was slightly harsher than I was expecting it to be, but you know, taking criticism's part of it. So I'd say maybe feedback is a better word for it, because I've talked a lot about criticism there as if like, you know, all my work has ever got is someone telling me, can you do this again, please? Which is absolutely not the case. It's actually like 75% is telling you what was great. You know, 75% of the feedback I've ever had on anything was just telling me what was good about it. And that makes you do that thing more. So actually, like, the level of criticism probably is a little bit less than I've made it seem in that answer. I think I kind of use the word criticism because that was in the question. You know, I could definitely think of examples where I feel like, okay, that, all right, I'll take that on board. Okay. And I think a lesson I learned was not to be defensive, actually. I think early days I was quite defensive about criticism. I tried to justify why I'd done things the way I'd done them. Actually, I learned, you know what, just what this person's telling me is right. So just listen to it and do it again next time. And, you know, good thing about radio is there's always a next time, you know, produce a lot of material. So yeah, I'd say feedback rather than criticism. You do have to learn not to be defensive, but a lot of it is positive, especially when you're new as well. People want to help people in radio. Like, I think, you know, we might talk about this later, but I can think of a lot of people that like helped me when they didn't need to. And I've always tried to be like that with new people coming into it. So yeah, there's a bit of feedback. I don't think you'd expect any less, but I think once you learn that that's part of the job, it's not the kind of thing you're going to go home and, you know, really be upset about.
Awesome. So just taking it back a step here, what qualifications do you have and do you need to get into this kind of line of work?
Well, I've got an undergraduate degree in broadcast journalism. Obviously, did that after doing my A levels. You know, for my current job, I have a postgrad certificate in higher education for the teaching side of it. But for the radio, especially going into journalism, most people have a degree now. Not everybody. Like, you can kind of become a journalist through qualification, like I did, or you can actually kind of become a journalist through through experience and just by doing journalism over and over and over again. And, you know, for people who started young or went straight into kind of working for a paper or working for a publication without having a degree like that, you know, you can kind of become a journalist through experience as well. But yeah, I've got an undergraduate broadcast journalism degree.
Cool. And we've kind of covered some of the questions, I think, in a roundabout way. But and again, this is always an interesting question to ask because there's so many potential answers to it. And you know, with most, so it's what does a typical day look like for you? But with most jobs, there's no such thing as a quote unquote typical day. So I'm just interested to kind of explore what that's like for you.
Well, I think, you know, obviously these days, you know, working for universities involves a lot of kind of prepping material, teaching students, and, you know, kind of one-to-ones and trying to help people kind of get on in the industry. You know, when I was working in radio, I suppose it depends on the job. So, like, I'll give you an example of what my first job in radio was. So my first full-time job in radio, I worked for a commercial radio station in Coventry called Mercia FM. And it was only a 3-person newsroom, so it's a relatively small operation covering city of Coventry and the county of Warwickshire. So quite a big area for 3 people to cover. And my job will basically involve half of the day I will be a newsreader and half of the day I'd be a reporter. So when I first started at Mercia, I was the newsreader for the drive time programme. So that means I read the news at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock, I think. Maybe on the half hour in there as well. So that means that the first half of the day I'm doing reporter work. So that means I need to come in there's not a lot of time when you think about you trying to do 2 jobs in one day. So I need to come in the morning with some ideas of stories that we could do. And that could be either taking a story that's in the news that day and thinking, well, who can we speak to locally? How can we move this story on? How can we add something to it ourselves? Or it could be something I've seen or I've heard that I might want to follow up on to do an original story about. So yeah, the first half of my day, I would either be, kind of trying to firm up some facts of a story. I might be trying to set up an interviewee. That could be on the phone or it could be in person. And then, I would, if it was for a news bulletin, I'd take some clips from an interview, write up a cue, a script around it, the bit that the newsreader reads, and then get that into the bulletin. So kind of mixture of interviewing, writing scripts, coming up with stories, reading bulletins, and just trying to get everything done on time, basically.
A common problem in every job, that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's like been the biggest factor that kind of helped you in your career journey?
Well, I suppose I've talked about it a little bit, but the biggest thing in my career has been people who've given me help along the way, basically. Mm-hmm. And I can think of probably a handful of people who, as I mentioned earlier, kind of helped me when they didn't need to, because there was nothing in it for them. They just kind of, they just, saw someone who could benefit from their advice, I suppose, or benefit from their time. But yeah, people who kind of gave me their time when they didn't need to, massively helped me. So yeah, when we talk about getting on in the industry, yeah, getting that initial foot in the doors is part of it. Building up your experience, building up your skills, but also I think to some degree, especially when you're starting out, I think to some degree, like trying to be the type of person that people want to work with, and I'd like to think that I was in the kind of the early days, like what I kind of maybe lacked in experience. I'll give something a go. I'd make the tea. I'd do daft things like sometimes, like I still do this now. Like if I know I'm going to see someone the following day, I just want to make sure I've like got like a little bit of small talk that I want to have with them. So like if I know they've been on holiday or something like that, I'll make sure I ask them about their holiday. And like it's daft, isn't it? But like I remember learning that quite early doors, and just thinking of like the better kind of little relationships you can make with people. Sometimes you haven't got a lot of time to make them, so it can just be as much as like trying to be cheerful and asking them whether they take 2 sugars or not. But trying to build those little personal relationships is advice I would give, and I think it's something that helped me quite a bit in those early days. And people that helped me from like my first job, whenever I've moved from one job to another, someone has helped me make that move in one way along the line. And I'd like to think that's because I always try to give things a go, and I try to make a good impression on people, basically.
With whether we like it or not, people kind of make a first impression. They judge people based on the first few seconds of meeting them. So anything that you can do to improve, to help that first impression is really going to help you in building the relationship, which is again useful in any job, but particularly in radio because you speak to people and you interview people and whatnot.
Yeah, and I to be honest, first impressions is something I've been mindful over the years. I haven't always been brilliant at, actually, and that's why sometimes you have to recognize the things you need to like work on a little bit, and that was something I recognized I needed to work on. Like I'm not amazing at small talk, so that's why I'm like, right, well, when I next see that, I know I'm going to see this person tomorrow. I just have a thing to ask them about, and it's daft, isn't it? It's so daft, but
good idea, though.
I still do that now. I still do that now.
So I don't want to keep you too long.
But I've got a little bit more time.
A couple more questions. So on the flip side, what's been like the biggest obstacle in getting to where you are today, and like how do you overcome that?
So I think in terms of overcoming it, right, some obstacles you can't overcome, and I think you have to accept that. So in terms of right, what can I say? My worst, the thing I had to kind of overcome. I think that so it kind of goes back to this like veneer of confidence thing, right? And radio's a funny business because on the on the front you have to be a confident, you have to come across in a confident way, you have to present yourself well, you have to be good at talking to people and all that kind of thing. But actually, like most people struggle with some of that to some extent, if not all of it. And I think having a veneer of confidence, whereas perhaps sometimes beneath the surface I haven't been very confident, I think that's probably held me back a little bit sometimes. Like as I think sometimes I've been kind of scared to go for jobs where I don't 100% know what the job involves, and I don't 100 like some. I like to have a bit of an idea if it's possible to find out who else is going for this job. Like, you know, have I got a chance? Whereas really, I suppose I should be just like, I like the look of the job. I think I could do it. I've just put my application in, and it's somebody else's business to work out whether I can do that job or not. But you know, I think sometimes I've had to talk myself into doing those kind of things. So I suppose learning to kind of put a bit of a veneer of confidence on things on days when you're not feeling very confident, just like coming in and making sure you're bringing a smile into the room, bringing some energy into the room, even if you don't feel like it. So I think something like that. I think, yeah, it's just, it comes back to like, just, you know, for me, just identifying that I can be a bit quiet. And I had a bit of personal, you know, talk about personal feedback. I went on a course once, leadership course, and we all gave each other some personal feedback. And personal feedback can be very difficult to receive because it's feedback about how you portray yourself. And one thing that one person said to me is like, sometimes you seem to lack a little bit of enthusiasm for what you're talking about. And I was a little bit kind of that. I'd not heard that before, but actually I think I can be a bit like that. I think sometimes I can be a little bit sarcastic, and like, you know, I think thinking back a few years, I probably thought that was kind of a bit funny at one time, but I realize now it's all about what are other people thinking when they're talking to you. So these days I try and be a bit more kind of openly enthusiastic about things, you know, sometimes tell myself to kind of be enthusiastic if I need to, tell myself to bring some energy if I need to. And, you know, I used to do a lot of early morning bulletin shifts and producing shifts where you're coming into work at 4:30 in the morning. And trust me, like, you don't feel like you got any energy at that time in the morning. And, you know, you can't just go into work and moan to your colleagues because they all feel the same. Like, nobody wants to be at work at that time. So I think, you know, that's one example of where I just, you know, before walking the door, just try and tell myself, just, you know, try and put a smile on and try and, you know, be one of the team basically. So I guess this kind of weird thing about like, you know, overcoming your kind of like self-doubt a little bit, learning to put a bit of a front on it, realizing everybody else is doing it, so, you know, don't worry about it. And yeah, so, and the things you can't change about your life, right? We all have things in our lives that stop us achieving certain things. Like some of us have things in our lives that actually are an advantage to achieve certain things. So, you know, you mentioned connections right at the start of our chat. You know, you may have some family connections that could help you into the industry that you want to get into. And you know what? Go for it. Good for you. But actually, we might have things going on in our lives that stop us doing things. We might have things that stop us traveling around the country for work or what have you. And I think just accept those things. Accept those things that are beyond your control and concentrate on the things that you can control. And that's what I tried to do over the years, and sometimes been better at it than others.
So I've got one more question for you, and then if anyone else has any questions or wants to learn anything more about what we've discussed, then by all means put it in the chat and we'll do our best to answer it. And you may well have answered this question already, and it might be difficult to kind of narrow it down to one. But I was going to say, what is the most important lesson that you've learned so far in your career?
Oh, what is the most important lesson that I've learned? I'll tell you what, I was very pleased with how my radio career went, and it's not by any stretch of the imagination over like, as it stands. Obviously, it just gone a bit sideways to go into teaching at the minute. But I think that I did more in the job than I really ever kind of believed I would do. And I think what I learned was that kind of, so I got a couple of editor roles in the BBC. One of my jobs was I was an assistant editor of a BBC local radio station, which is like the deputy station manager. And that kind of job was well beyond what I expected to achieve when I was doing, Daft Foxes outside Staples in Lady Bay Retail Park, but I think actually you kind of learn that those jobs kind of like up the scale are kind of quite doable based on a few quite simple things. And it comes down to like working hard, like get in early, ask questions, make notes is a big thing. Like I made a lot of notes while I was working because I knew there were certain tasks that I maybe only have to do twice a year. So I needed to make sure I had notes on how to do things. But work hard, build those relationships with people. So, you never know when they might pay off. Sometimes it pays off straight away. Sometimes it's years down the line. Strangely, sometimes it's that person that came into, I can think of people that came in to do work experience with me, where kind of I was the senior one and they're doing like brilliant things now that like surpassed what I've achieved. So, you never know about that relationship building thing. But I think, work hard, get to know people. And, when it comes to kind of building a career, you don't have to be like the best person in the world at doing your thing. You just got to be better than the other people going for the job. And, actually that's sometimes not as difficult as it might seem. Like just work at it, really, build your relationships, get used to taking a bit of feedback, something we talked about it. And I think the final thing actually is, if you are looking to try and achieve something at work, the first stage to kind of getting down that route is saying you want to do it. I think initially I was a bit scared of saying, I want to do this job, or, when that job comes up, I'm really interested in it. Actually, you've got to put the question in your boss's mind, or that person who's going to make the decision. You've got to put the question in their mind that actually, is this person the person I'm looking for? Say you want to do it as well. So it's a bit of a rambly answer. Work hard, make friends with people, make tea, but put yourself forward. Don't be scared of responsibility as well. Someone's got to do it. Might as well be you. If you don't do it, someone else will end up getting that job, and who'll probably do a worse job than you. No, they'll probably do a brilliant job, but don't be scared of responsibility.
Definitely, I think that's an important point, because, as you said, if you don't tell people that you're interested, they won't know.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then
it took me ages to work that out. It took me years to work that out. Yeah.
We've got one more question in the chat, which says, is it vital when trying to get work experience or a job to have connections and references?
No. Look, connections is an advantage, and it's one of the things that the media industry has a problem with, in that, if you, if one of your parents is in the business already, or if somebody in your family is, or, a family friend or something like that, yes, that can be an advantage. And, I would say to anybody, use any advantage you can get. So I can't fault people who go down that route. But actually, you will notice a lot of conversation around the media around diversity. And, diversity has always been a kind of a buzzword within the media, but I think, never more so than it is now. And part of the issue the media has is, when it comes to bringing in new talent, is, getting people who don't have connections, and perhaps nobody in their family has been to university, or, they might not, kind of fit the kind of tried and tested route, I suppose, of coming into the business. But that doesn't mean they're not going to be a great radio reporter. They're not going to find great stories. They're not going to be a brilliant producer. They're not going to be like this amazing storytelling presenter, whatever it is. So no, you don't need the connections, although the connections are an advantage. But I would say, if you want to do it, I'd go back to like, how can you market yourself? So some things you can do. You want to get into radio, make a little podcast series. Think about what that could be. Like, maybe kind of target it towards the kind of thing you want to do. So, if you want to be if you want to work in BBC local radio, and that they deal in local stories, right? Make a podcast series talking like to interesting people in the town that you live. You do like a 10-minute interview with them. You can do like, 12 different episodes. And yeah, look, it might be the first thing you ever record, and some of it might be a bit rubbish, some of it might be brilliant, but it shows you're doing something. And yeah, you might not have any connections, but I guarantee everybody else who wants work experience is not doing that. So, you know, try something like that. Try the blogging route if you want to go down written journalism. And yeah, also another thing I would say that's really important now is how do you look on social media? So if somebody looks your name up on the internet, what do they find? What does your Twitter say? What does your Instagram say? So I think, you know, you shouldn't be saying anything on social media that you wouldn't be happy to kind of say in a kind of public forum, full stop. People get a bit confused about how much they should say. And my advice is, like, if you're not sure, don't. But if your social media is like just for a small group of family and friends, like, you know, lock it and control who can see it. Because yeah, I think that happens for work experience people. We want to have a little look at who these people are. And, you know, if I look at your Twitter and you've got a lot of extreme views on there and you can't spell and, you know, really insulting, then I'm not sure you're going to be getting work experience, you know. But actually, if your Twitter kind of paints you in a good light, it shows some like nice photos you've taken around from where you live, or it shows some like interest in the kind of subject area, that can be an advantage. So you don't need connections. Think about what you can do for yourself to market yourself, and you don't start that. You can't start that early enough. You know, you can start that way before university. You can start that as 16-year-old. You can't start that early enough.
Perfect. I think that was an excellent answer to that question.
Sorry, I've droned on a little bit there, but as you can tell, I've got a bit of an ego, and I
not at all.
Talking about myself.
That's why we do this.
Sorry.
No, not at all. Honestly, I think that you gave such a great insight that, like, you covered multiple questions in your answers, which is great. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much for watching this episode of Careers Talks Live. Thanks for coming on, Arran. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Make sure that you follow us on social media and everything like that. All the links that you need are in the description, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one.